Hello there, listeners. This is an audio recording of my book, The Westwind Tales of Sword and Sand, which is book 1 in the Westwind Tales series. If you like what you hear, consider subscribing, leaving a like or a comment, or preferably all of the above. If you want more content like this, consider supporting the channel by purchasing my book on Amazon, becoming a channel member by clicking the join button, or, preferably, both. So sit back, relax, grab a cup of tea, and enjoy the chapter. Chapter 6. Theod och du Wyrding Gwell. Theod and the Wyrding Guild. Edmund and Jupe walked back the way they had come through the streets of Rockford. As they came to the stone bridge over the Morgan, the sun was reaching its highest point in the sky. "You sent for a weirder yesterday?" asked Edmund, looking over at Jupe, who nodded and stared straight ahead. "While you were unconscious. The guild takes the abuse of ley magic quite seriously. They will not let this go now that they are aware of it. Theod is as good as taken care of." The Wyrding Guild had its own territory within the Northlands. When it came to issues of magic, the guild believed that they alone ought to be in control. They had fingers in every court within the Northlands, along with the staunch support of the king. It was illegal to hold any judicial hearing without the presence of a guild truthseer. While their aggressive monopoly on all things magical sometimes turned violent, the Wyrding Guild did provide a sense of justice to the Northlands. Not even the king could lie to a truthseer without consequence. If a weirder really was on their way to Rockford, Theod would not stand a chance at stirring up the crowd with magic. The truthseer would see through him like glass. Edmund chuckled to himself. "Looks like Theod's at the end of his rope, then." Jupe frowned. "Yes, it would seem so. However, a man at the end of his rope is often more dangerous than a man still clinging to its middle. I hope that he doesn't do anything rash before the weirder gets here. We don't have the imposing presence of 2 Olma to ward off the townsfolk anymore either." Edmund nodded. He hadn't thought of that. "Well, if you sent for the weirder yesterday morning, then they have most likely gotten the message and sent someone already. If they were coming from the Wyrding Guild itself, then it may take days for them to get here." Jupe stretched his arms over his head as they walked onward, heaving a sigh. "Well, that would be the case if I had sent the bird to the guild stronghold east of the capital. I happen to know there is a weirder up the Morgan at North Harbor. I'd be surprised if he wasn't here by tonight." He chuckled and rubbed his hands together in anticipation. "I really try not to hold grudges, mind you, but Theod has had this coming for a long time." The two of them shared a quiet laugh as they strolled along the road back to the farmhouse. Birds sang in the trees. Sunlight warmed Edmund's face as he plodded along down the road. Jupe turned off the path onto a narrow trail that ran into the woods. Edmund followed closely behind. Leaves crunched beneath his feet and kicked up behind him. Apart from the occasional call of a bird overhead, the sounds of the forest were muffled by the dense foliage on either side of the pathway. The noise of rushing water grew louder as they hiked onward. Presently, they came to the western bank of the Morgan. A small bench sat at the water's edge beneath a willow tree that hung lazily over the flowing water. Edmund's thoughts briefly turned to the 2 Olma. He wondered how far they had made it that morning. Jupe stopped in front of the bench and motioned to Edmund with a hand. "This is the place. I come here sometimes to clear my head. I came here yesterday. The river helps me think." He looked over at Edmund and then gestured at another trail, heading off northward into the woods. "That trail leads to the house." He turned south. "Follow me, Ed. There's something else I want to show you." The two of them headed south, away from the farmhouse and into the trees. There was no path that they followed. As they walked, Jupe spoke. "I found this place several years ago. I've tried to keep it hidden from any townsfolk that come up this way." They came to a small clearing in the trees. As they stepped out of the dense understory and into the open, all noise went silent. No birds, no insect, not even the sound of the Morgan could be heard from within the clearing. At its center, there stood a large, white tree. Its boughs were close to the ground, and its leaves were still green and alive despite the season. Jupe walked up to the tree and stared at it reverently. "This is a mountain oak. They aren't supposed to grow at this altitude. Oak told me that clearings like this are dotted all throughout the Witchwood. They are sacred to the Olma. This is the only one this far east in the forest." Edmund looked up at Jupe. "We're in the Witchwood?" Jupe nodded without turning. "Yes, the farms are at least. Rockford lies on its eastern edge across the Morgan. The forest has never stretched much farther than the river. Turning back to Edmund, he continued, The Olma believe that these clearings are the Forest Mother's way of reaching out to her children. Jupe squatted down and pointed out a small plant growing among the exposed and gnarled roots of the mountain oak. This is silverleaf. It only grows around mountain oak roots. The Olma brew a tea out of it and meditate under the tree's branches. They say that it helps them look inward and relive past experiences. The Elder Bulls use this method to nurture their connection to the forest. Edmund arched an eyebrow and scratched at the back of his head. So it causes them to see things? Jupe nodded and stood up. Sort of. I suppose you could look at it that way, although I wouldn't suggest that to an Olma. The whole process is holy to them. But the point is, however you choose to look at it, the silverleaf plant causes memories to resurface. Edmund grinned. I see. I am hoping, said Jupe, that the effects of the silverleaf will bring out your memories slowly, so that you are not hurt by them. However, the plant only produces this effect within the clearings, specifically within the fey rings around the oaks. He gestured to the ground. Edmund glanced down and noticed a row of toadstools that ran in a large circle around the trunk of the oak. That's a little uncanny, muttered Edmund. The toadstools were so small that unless you were looking for them, you might not realize they were there. Jupe continued. I tried it, and the silverleaf herb really works. I think that you should give it a go. Maybe you'll remember something important. Just, crush the leaves in your fingers and rub the juice inside your nose. Brewing it in a tea produces the best results, but this is way faster. Edmund, feeling a little skeptical, walked over to the oak and plopped down at its base, leaning his back against the smooth trunk. He grabbed a few leaves off the silverleaf near his thigh and pinched them between his thumb and forefinger. Edmund glanced up at Jupe, who nodded at him to continue. He noticed, offhandedly, that Jupe's hands were fidgeting slightly at his waist as he watched Edmund from where he stood. Taking a deep breath, Edmund rubbed the crushed leaves on the inside of his nostrils. Wiping his fingers on a pant leg, Edmund breathed steadily, in through his nose, out through his mouth. He could feel his head go numb. The ground beneath him seemed to move slightly as though he was on the surface of a rippling pond. Giving a sigh that sounded something like relief, Jupe stepped backward out of the fey ring. Perfect, he rubbed his hands together. I'm going to head back to the house. Stay as long as you need. I'll come get you if you're out too long. Good luck, Ed, and, take your time. He turned and quickly disappeared out of the clearing. The sound of his footsteps vanished almost immediately after he left. The clearing was utterly silent. Edmund could hear his own heart beating. His vision blurred slightly, and he began to think that this may not have been the best idea. However, when he tried to stand, Edmund found that he could not move his limbs at all. This should have sent him into a state of panic. However, all he felt within him was a deep calm. Closing his eyes, he took a long, full breath. Gradually, he began to feel a presence, as though someone was approaching from a distance. A soothing voice echoed through his mind. It was soft and motherly. The sound of it warmed Edmund's heart. There was something familiar about it. Hello again, River. It's been a long time since you last used this method of speaking with me. What happened to you? You used to simply call out to me when we would talk. Not even the elder bulls of the Olma had a connection to me as deep as yours. Where have you been, River, my child? Edmund shivered as the voice continued through his head, talking to him of small things from his past, of the eastern wildkin tribes, of his time as a healer in their midst. The Forest Mother, he thought. A small laugh rippled through his head. Yes, River, my child, you have forgotten so much. What happened to you, my dear little fawn? Edmund couldn't help but smile at the warmth that poured from the Forest Mother's voice. I don't know, he said. I was hoping that you could tell me about myself, about who I am. The Forest Mother laughed softly again. Of course I will, River. I will tell you of your life with the Olma in the Eastlands. It began in the months of falling... She stopped abruptly. There was silence for a moment before she began again. It began in the... Again she cut off. When her voice came back into his mind, she sounded flustered, and her speech was strained. I'm sorry, River, I can't. There's someone... She's not letting me... Suddenly, the Forest Mother's presence vanished from Edmund's mind, as though she had been roughly shoved away. Another voice rang through his head like the peal of a bell. That's better, it said. She always was such a bore. Now, you and I can have a nice long talk. Alone. Edmund struggled to move from where he sat. His limbs still refused to move at his command, the silverleaf having seeped into every corner of his body. As he strained against the effects of the plant, the voice, which was distinctly feminine, sounded again. This time it came not from his mind, but from somewhere behind him. "You ingested silverleaf? I thought you knew better than to let that debilitating little herb inside you. I've been looking for you, Eslinweir, for longer than I would have liked." Edmund managed with great effort to twitch his left forefinger. The voice continued. "You have never hidden yourself from me before, Eslinweir. Why did you not answer my call?" The voice, which had sounded hurt seconds before, became agitated. "Why do you not answer me now, Eslinweir?" Giving up on trying to move, Edmund sighed and said, "Look, whoever you are, I can't move, and I don't feel like talking until I can. So if you can't help me, please be quiet." There was silence in the clearing for a moment until the voice, now sounding quite annoyed, spoke again. "As demanding as ever, I see. Very well, if you can't purge a small bit of poison from your body, then I suppose I'll do it for you." The effects of the silverleaf on his body vanished instantly. He gasped as he regained control of his movement. Standing up shakily, he was about to speak when a thought rushed into his head. "Did you say poison?" he asked. The voice returned. "Yes, poison. You may have heard of it. Something you shouldn't shove up your nose. Why you let someone trick you into going near that magic-sucking plant is beyond me." Edmund began to grow uneasy. "Jupe said the plant would help me regain my memories." The voice cut him off. "Yes, when it's brewed into a tea. The heat destroys the poison within the leaves, but it will still cut you off from your magic. Honestly, Eslinweir, I don't understand how you could be stupid enough to let Jupin Hatcher talk you into doing that. He's probably been waiting for this day to come for years. And to think, we were almost at his mercy. If I hadn't stepped in just now, you would have been as good as gone." Edmund was growing confused. "What are you talking about? I don't think Jupe would do something like that." The voice sounded again. "You trust him over me? Please! You must know he's been stalling you this whole time, telling you that regaining your memories quickly would hurt you. Ridiculous. What's come over you?" "Why should I trust you?" shouted Edmund into the clearing. "I don't know who you are. Jupe has been nothing but kind to me. He fed me, gave me a place to sleep, he even saved my life." He spun around only to find the clearing empty. "And where are you?" There was silence in the clearing. Edmund turned this way and that, trying to find where the voice was coming from. "You don't... what?" The voice was quiet, thoughtful. Suddenly, a mist formed in front of him. Condensing together, it morphed into the form of an incredibly short, young woman. Her skin was a deep brown, almost black, like polished ebony, and her eyes were the most beautiful, sparkling violet Edmund had ever seen. Her hair, which hung to her waistline, was a glossy black and curled into slight waves. Her head barely came up to the base of Edmund's chest. Though she was small, she was in no way childish. She had a slender frame and wore a black dress that accented her womanly form, hugging every perfect curve down to her bare feet. Gold and silver thread worked itself into various patterns along her waist. The sides of the dress were slit, revealing her legs up to her thighs. Her arms were bare and her hands were planted firmly onto her hips. She was obviously a Dwaro. The sight of her was so breathtaking it left Edmund speechless. She was as beautiful as the starry night, yet somehow equally as terrifying. Edmund's mouth worked slowly as he tried to say something, but no words came to his lips. Her eyes narrowed slightly as they searched his own. Finally, she spoke, softly at first. "You don't know me?" "That can only mean..." Her hand slipped from her hips, and she took a step forward, peering up into Edmund's eyes. "The spell worked. I didn't think it would work. There's no way it should have worked. You wouldn't have let it, unless..." Her eyes widened. "You thought it was mine. You let the spell touch you because you thought it was for me. Why would I ever harm you? This is all my fault." She took a step backward and stared at the ground in thought. Suddenly she looked up again at Edmund. Her eyes captured his attention completely. "You must leave immediately. Go north as far as you can. Stay away from the Southlands. The spell won't last forever. I'll find a way to fix it, I promise." Edmund pulled his thoughts away from her eyes. "What do you mean, leave? I can't. Jupe is helping me regain my memories. If I leave now..." She cut him off again. "You can't trust him, Eslinweir. He is using you. You need to leave now. It's not safe for you here anymore. The slavers are looking for you. I saw a Wyrding Guild truthseer on his way to this town. You must leave now. You are no match for them in this weakened state." "I know about the truthseer. Jupe sent for him. He's needed in this town. You can't trust Jupin Hatcher. You don't even know him. It's true that the Weirder may well be needed in this town, but that's most surely not why Jupin sent for him. Don't you remember the touch of the Wyrding Guild's binding magic? He's coming for you, Eslin Weir. Binding magic. The words stirred memories of panic in Edmund's mind that he could not make sense of. He had the strong urge to listen to the Dwaro girl, to run as fast as he could northward. But instead, he asked, why would Jupe do such a thing? Did you not hear what I've been saying? Jupin is a guildsman through and through. She stopped, and jerked her head in the direction of the farmhouse. After staring for a moment, she turned back to Edmund. It matters no more what Jupin is doing or why. It's too late for him. It seems his fate has finally caught up. She reached up and placed a hand on Edmund's cheek. But it's not too late for you, Eslin Weir, my heart. You can still flee before the Weirder senses you're here. You must run north. Edmund's heart quickened. What do you mean it's too late for Jupe? He froze. The scent of smoke drifted into the clearing. A chill ran up his spine. Oh no. As he charged away from her into the forest, her voice entered his head. What are you doing? You can't go that way. The Weirder will find you. Leave him. He's already dead. Edmund blocked her from his mind. Stumbling through the undergrowth, he reached the bench by the riverside. Turning slightly, he sped down the path toward the farmhouse. The smell of smoke grew stronger as he ran onward. Frantic thoughts tumbled through his mind. This can't be happening, he panted. Not again. Well, that wraps up part 1. Make sure you tune in for part 2 later this week. But in the meantime, leave a comment and a like. If you can't wait for part 2, then you can head on over to Amazon and purchase the full-length book there. Or you can click on the link down below. I'll see you all next time, but until then, enjoy the adventure.